Long before the first cities rose along the fertile banks of the Tigris and Euphrates, long before the written word became a tool to record taxes or royal decrees, there were whispers, echoes of beings whose power and knowledge surpassed anything humanity could comprehend. Some called them gods, others celestial visitors, yet the stories persisted across millennia, inscribed on clay tablets, carved into stone, and painted on the walls of temples now lost to time. These beings were said to have descended from the heavens, their eyes reflecting the stars, their presence commanding awe and obedience. They were the Anunnaki, the mysterious figures at the heart of Sumerian myth, and for centuries, their true nature has remained obscured, shrouded in the mists of legend and the deliberate erasure of history. To the untrained eye, the ancient Sumerians were simply the creators of one of the earliest civilizations, credited with inventions like the wheel, cuneiform writing, and complex irrigation systems. But hidden within their myths lies a far more profound narrative, a story of influence and bloodlines that could rewrite our understanding of human origins. The Anunnaki were not mere observers, they were rulers, engineers, and perhaps even genetic architects of early humanity. Some researchers suggest that the kings of Sumer were not chosen by chance, but were descendants of these celestial visitors, their authority legitimized by a bloodline that connected them directly to the gods. This idea, long dismissed by mainstream scholars, has fueled the imagination of historians, mythologists, and conspiracy theorists alike. Imagine a world where the skies were not just distant and unreachable, but a source of contact, guidance, and control. The Sumerians described gods who came from the heavens, bringing knowledge of agriculture, mathematics, and medicine. They built ziggurats, massive terrace structures that reached toward the sky, not merely as temples, but as focal points to honor and perhaps communicate with these celestial patrons. Every inscription, every carved relief, hints at a relationship between gods and men that was intimate, codified, and governed by rules we are only beginning to decipher. Yet, the story does not end with mere mythology. Ancient texts hint at something far more extraordinary, a sacred bloodline, carefully preserved, passed from these gods to chosen humans. Some kings were celebrated not just for their leadership, but for their connection to the divine, a connection that may have shaped the politics, religion, and even the very DNA of early civilizations. To uncover this lineage is to challenge the very foundations of history as it has been taught. It is to question whether humanity's greatest achievements were truly human, or if they were guided, manipulated, and enhanced by beings from beyond the stars. Modern scholars often dismiss such notions, labeling them as myths, allegories, or flights of fancy. But what if there was a deliberate attempt to obscure the truth? What if the history we are taught is merely the surface, a carefully constructed narrative that hides the deeper, more unsettling reality? Across the ancient world, stories of gods interacting with humans, imparting secret knowledge, and choosing special bloodlines appear again and again. From Sumeria to Egypt, from Mesoamerica to the Indus Valley, the echoes of these celestial influences are strikingly similar, suggesting a hidden network of influence that stretches across continents and centuries. As we begin this journey, we will delve into the very origins of human civilization, tracing the faint traces left behind by the Anunnaki. We will examine the myths and the artifacts, the kings and the prophecies, searching for patterns that mainstream history has either overlooked or intentionally suppressed. Along the way, we will confront questions that challenge our understanding of who we are, where we come from, and whether our destiny is truly our own, or guided by a lineage older and more powerful than we have ever imagined. In the darkness of forgotten temples and the quiet corners of ancient libraries, the secrets of the Anunnaki's royal bloodline lie waiting, obscured by time but not erased. As we peel back the layers, What will emerge is a story that blurs the line between myth and reality, between history and hidden truth. And as you listen, perhaps in the stillness of night, you may begin to sense that the world you know is only a fraction of what truly exists, and that the legacy of the gods may be closer to us than we dare to imagine. The land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, later known as Mesopotamia, is often described as the cradle of civilization. Here, in a region of fertile soil and unpredictable rivers, humanity took its first tentative steps toward urban life, leaving behind villages that would grow into sprawling cities. But beneath the surface of this apparent triumph of human ingenuity lies a question that continues to perplex historians and theorists alike. How did a society so ancient, so small in numbers, accomplish feats that even modern civilizations struggle to replicate? The Sumerians built monumental structures, developed complex legal systems, and charted the stars with precision that rivals contemporary astronomy. Some scholars argue that these achievements were purely human, the result of gradual evolution and ingenuity. Yet, there's an alternative perspective, one that suggests these accomplishments were guided, influenced, and even initiated by beings from beyond the earth. The Sumerians themselves left clues in the myths and records they passed down. Their gods, known collectively as the Anunnaki, were described as descending from the heavens to walk among humans. Unlike other mythologies where gods remained distant, the Anunnaki interacted directly with people, teaching them agriculture, architecture, mathematics, and governance. They were not merely worshipped. They were emulated, feared, and followed as rulers, intermediaries between the mortal and the divine. Could it be that the first cities, the first laws, and the very concept of kingship were not inventions of humanity alone, but gifts, or perhaps impositions, of a superior race? The idea becomes even more compelling when we examine the scale and precision of Sumerian engineering. Ziggurats, with their step terraces reaching toward the heavens, were not only religious centers, but also symbols of knowledge and power. The layout of these cities, the canals that irrigated crops across vast distances, and the careful observation of the stars all point to an understanding that surpasses what would be expected from an early agrarian society. Some researchers argue that such knowledge could have only come from direct instruction, that the Anunnaki may have acted as teachers, scientists, and rulers, guiding humanity toward sophistication while simultaneously controlling its development. Archaeological evidence hints at this hidden influence. Clay tablets, meticulously inscribed with cuneiform script, describe not only mundane records of trade and law, but also the presence of gods who came from the sky. These texts recount the creation of humans, sometimes described as laborers or servants designed to mine precious resources for their celestial overseers. While mainstream historians often interpret these passages metaphorically, alternative theories suggest they may represent literal accounts of genetic engineering or manipulation. If this is true, it would imply that the Sumerians were more than a civilization. They were participants in an experiment, a society shaped from its very inception by beings whose motives were both complex and enigmatic. Kingship in Sumeria provides another compelling puzzle. Unlike many ancient societies, Sumerian rulers claimed descent from the gods themselves. This was not mere symbolism. Their legitimacy rested on a bloodline that supposedly connected them to the Anunnaki. Each dynasty carefully maintained genealogical records, tracing their ancestry back to divine figures. Could these records be more than myth? Could they preserve fragments of a reality in which a select group of humans carried the royal blood of otherworldly beings, distinguishing them from ordinary people and granting them both authority and access to forbidden knowledge? The contrast between this narrative and mainstream history is striking. Conventional accounts portray Sumeria as a remarkable but purely human achievement, emphasizing trade, agriculture, and political organization. Alternative perspectives, however, suggest a far more complex picture, one in which human civilization is not the product of solitary ingenuity, but the result of intervention and guidance by a superior race. This duality, one of mystery and suppression, revelation and denial, runs through the story of Sumeria, inviting us to question what has been left unsaid in the history books and what may have been deliberately concealed. Geography itself adds to the intrigue. Mesopotamia, with its rivers, marshes, and deserts, is a challenging landscape for survival, particularly for early urban communities. The Sumerians not only survived but thrived, creating densely populated cities like Uruk, Ur, and Eridu. Could the wisdom of the Anunnaki have provided them with the means to adapt so effectively? Perhaps the gods were not merely spiritual figures, but practical guides, instructing humanity in engineering, agriculture, and governance to ensure the stability and prosperity of these early cities. And yet, the more we uncover, the more questions arise. If the Anunnaki were indeed present in Mesopotamia, why did their influence diminish? Why did these advanced teachings not spread universally? Or why do we not see continuous evidence of this knowledge in every subsequent civilization? Some theorists suggest a purposeful withdrawal, a calculated disappearance intended to allow humanity to develop on its own, or perhaps a catastrophic event that disrupted the connection entirely. What remains are tantalizing traces, whispers and texts, and enigmatic artifacts that hint at a civilization far more extraordinary than conventional accounts acknowledge. As we explore the Sumerians' achievements, a pattern emerges, a civilization that seems to straddle the line between human ingenuity and celestial intervention. Their cities, laws, and cosmology are not merely impressive. They're almost impossible to explain within the confines of conventional understanding. And it is within this space, between what we know and what has been hidden, that the story of the Anunnaki's influence and their royal bloodline begins to unfold. We are not merely looking at history. We are peering into a carefully constructed legacy, one that may redefine the origins of civilization itself. In the tapestry of ancient Sumerian myth, the Anunnaki occupy a place unlike any other. Unlike distant deities who observe from afar, they descended from the heavens, walking among men, shaping the destinies of kings, and leaving an indelible mark on civilization itself. The name Anunnaki roughly translates to those who came from the heavens to earth, and their presence is recorded in texts, reliefs, and artifacts across Mesopotamia. Yet despite this evidence, the true nature of these beings remains shrouded in mystery, caught somewhere between legend, religious devotion, and the tantalizing possibility of an extraterrestrial origin. Were they gods in the truest sense? Ancient astronauts visiting a fledgling civilization, or perhaps interdimensional entities whose motives are unknowable to human minds? Descriptions of the Anunnaki paint them as both majestic and fearsome. They were said to possess extraordinary knowledge of the cosmos, commanding the forces of nature, directing the growth of crops, and establishing the first systems of law and governance. Some texts suggest they were capable of creating life itself, sculpting humans from clay, imbuing them with divine purpose, and even selectively manipulating their genes to serve specific functions. The idea of humans as an engineered species challenges every conventional notion of origin, yet it is consistent with recurring Sumerian narratives. Humans were created to serve the Anunnaki, mining precious minerals and building the infrastructure of early cities under their guidance. Their influence was not uniform. The Anunnaki were described as organized into factions, each with its own agenda. Enlil, the god of air and authority, was often depicted as strict and commanding, governing Earth with an iron will. Enki, the god of wisdom and water, took a more benevolent approach, assisting humans with knowledge and innovation. These narratives are not merely stories. They reflect a structured hierarchy, suggesting that if the Anunnaki were more than myth, their interventions were systematic, deliberate, and perhaps even political. The rivalries between these celestial figures mirrored the divisions of human societies, implying that the first human conflicts may have been influenced, or even orchestrated, by these beings. Art and iconography offer further clues. Reliefs from Sumerian temples depict figures with elongated heads, wings, or other features distinct from ordinary humans. Some scholars argue that these depictions are purely symbolic, representing power, divinity, or spiritual authority. Yet others suggest that these images are literal, recording beings whose physical form was different, their presence so extraordinary that it could not be represented in human terms. Temples, ziggurats, and other monumental structures were often oriented astronomically, aligning with stars and planets in ways that suggest advanced understanding. Were these alignments merely religious, or were they also practical, serving as navigation systems, energy channels, or communication networks for visitors from the sky? One of the most compelling pieces of evidence comes from the cuneiform texts themselves. The Sumerians left behind thousands of clay tablets, chronicling not just trade and law, but myths, genealogies, and instructions attributed to the Anunnaki. Within these texts, humans are depicted as collaborators, students, and laborers under the watchful eyes of the gods. In some accounts, humans receive knowledge that would be considered impossibly advanced for the era. Methods for farming, mathematics that could chart the heavens, medicinal practices, and complex engineering techniques. To skeptics, these are allegorical lessons. To alternative theorists, they are records of a civilization taught by beings far beyond the human level of understanding. There are also darker hints within these myths. Some texts describe rebellion, punishment, and conflict between the Anunnaki and their human creations. Humans, it seems, were not always content with their roles, leading to stories of divine wrath, plagues, and floods, cataclysms that may encode memory of real events in allegorical form. The story of a great flood, preserved not only in Sumeria but echoed in Babylonian, Hebrew, and other world mythologies, is one example. It hints at a civilization closely monitored by powerful entities, capable of intervening in dramatic and terrifying ways. The presence of these myths across multiple cultures suggests that the influence of the Anunnaki, or at least the memory of it, was widespread and deeply impactful. Linguistic evidence adds another layer to this mystery. Certain Sumerian words and names carry meanings that seem impossibly precise, describing cosmic concepts, celestial mechanics, and astronomical observations far beyond the era's technology. Some researchers argue that these terms are borrowed from a source beyond human experience, perhaps transmitted by the Anunnaki themselves. Even today, linguists and etymologists struggle to fully decode the texts, leaving the possibility that embedded within them is knowledge that could redefine history if interpreted correctly. The very notion of gods descending to Earth challenges modern thinking. Science demands proof, archaeology demands tangible artifacts, and history demands context. But the Anunnaki exist in a liminal space, partially visible through mythology, partially hidden behind millennia of cultural evolution and deliberate omission. Mainstream scholars often dismiss them as myth, while esoteric researchers point to evidence that is tantalizing yet frustratingly incomplete. The tension between these viewpoints creates a fertile ground for speculation, inviting us to consider that what we call legend may be a distorted memory of an ancient reality. Beyond the Sumerian texts, there are echoes of the Anunnaki in other ancient cultures. Egypt, India, and the Americas each have myths of beings descending from the sky, imparting knowledge, and interacting with humans in ways that defy conventional explanation. Whether this is evidence of a shared archetype, a psychological universal, or traces of a real phenomenon remains debated. But the similarities are striking, hinting at a global narrative in which the Anunnaki, or beings like them, played a pivotal role in shaping humanity's earliest steps. As we attempt to reconcile these fragments, one possibility begins to emerge. The Anunnaki were not abstract deities, but actors in a deliberate and complex drama involving Earth and its inhabitants. Their goals, their methods, and their legacy remain largely hidden, yet the footprints they left are unmistakable, etched into stone, recorded on tablets, and whispered through myths that survive to this day. If we are willing to look beyond the conventional, to read between the lines of ancient texts, the presence of these beings becomes not only plausible, but compelling, hinting at a reality far more extraordinary than traditional history acknowledges. The story of the Anunnaki is a story of influence, power, and mystery, a story that challenges our assumptions about humanity, civilization, and our place in the cosmos. It is a story that begins in the myths of Sumer, but reaches into the very fabric of our world, suggesting that the line between legend and reality is far thinner than we have been taught to believe. And as we follow their shadow through history, it becomes clear that the Anunnaki's role in shaping humanity may be the key to understanding a hidden, ancient lineage whose impact resonates even today. Among the many enigmas of Sumerian civilization, perhaps the most compelling is the concept of a sacred bloodline, a lineage that allegedly links humanity directly to the Anunnaki. While kingship has existed in countless societies, Sumerian rulers claimed something far more extraordinary. They were not merely appointed leaders. They were descendants of the gods themselves. These rulers carried a lineage said to bestow divine authority, unparalleled knowledge, and access to secrets that ordinary humans could scarcely comprehend. Within this sacred bloodline, myth and history intertwine, creating a narrative that has fascinated researchers, mystics, and conspiracy theorists for centuries. The idea of a royal bloodline is not unique to Sumer, but in this context, it takes on a cosmic dimension. Sumerian texts suggest that the Anunnaki did not merely govern or advise. They interbred with humans, selecting certain families to carry forward a hybrid lineage that was part celestial, part mortal. This was not a casual union, but a deliberate strategy to preserve the Anunnaki's influence across generations. Kings were therefore not chosen solely for their leadership abilities or charisma. Their right to rule was written in their DNA, sanctified by the heavens, and recorded in meticulous genealogies that trace their ancestry back to the very creators of civilization. These genealogies are more than lists of names. They are intricate accounts of lineage, alliances, and divine favor. They emphasize continuity, demonstrating how power was preserved within select families and passed from one generation to the next. In some cases, the genealogy suggests a blending of different Anunnaki factions with human lineages, indicating a careful orchestration of both political and genetic control. The kings themselves were often depicted as semi-divine figures, mediators between the human and the celestial, their legitimacy unquestionable because it was encoded in their blood. This sacred inheritance set them apart, creating a hierarchy in which ordinary humans served, revered, and feared those who claimed the blood of the gods. The implications of such a lineage are profound. If certain individuals carried the blood of the Anunnaki, it could explain the extraordinary abilities attributed to them in myth and history. The ruler's wisdom, foresight, and sometimes seemingly miraculous deeds may not have been purely symbolic, but the result of inherited knowledge and perhaps even genetic enhancement. Some researchers propose that this lineage preserved not just physical traits, but encoded information, an ancient form of knowledge transmission, a blueprint for leadership, strategy, and understanding of the natural and cosmic order. In this sense, the bloodline was not merely a symbol of power. It was a repository of ancient wisdom, safeguarded across generations. Artifacts, inscriptions, and royal iconography further support this idea. Sumerian kings were often portrayed with symbols denoting their divine ancestry. Headdresses, scepters, and jewelry that carried specific meanings, connecting them to celestial powers. Temples and palaces were designed to reinforce their semi-divine status, with architectural alignments and sacred chambers reflecting cosmic order. Even the very act of coronation was ritualized, suggesting that kings were not simply declared rulers, but inaugurated as intermediaries between the earthly realm and the heavens. Every gesture, every symbol, reinforced the narrative of a bloodline that was extraordinary in both origin and purpose. This sacred lineage also implies a form of secrecy. The Anunnaki, if they existed as described, would have sought to maintain control not only through direct intervention, but also through carefully managed succession. By restricting divine knowledge and bloodline privileges to select families, they could shape the development of civilization, ensuring that their influence persisted even when they were no longer physically present. Over centuries, this control may have become subtle, hidden beneath layers of mythology, tradition, and ritual, leaving behind clues only to be interpreted by those who knew where to look. The concept of a royal bloodline also resonates beyond Mesopotamia. Across the ancient world, myths of semi-divine rulers, chosen families, and sacred dynasties appear repeatedly, from pharaohs in Egypt claiming descent from Ra, to the kings of Ireland and Britain tracing ancestry to godlike ancestors. While these stories are often dismissed as myth or legend, the recurring theme suggests a possible connection, a shared understanding of bloodlines as a conduit of divine authority, echoing the practices of the Anunnaki and Sumer. Could it be that this knowledge was transmitted through civilizations, carried forward by those who understood the significance of lineage and the preservation of power? Even within Sumer, the stories of rulers are intertwined with the narrative of the Anunnaki themselves. Kings such as Edna and Gilgamesh are depicted not merely as mortals, but as extraordinary beings, with abilities and experiences that set them apart from ordinary humans. In some texts, they interact directly with the Anunnaki, receiving instruction, wisdom, and even immortality in symbolic form. These narratives blur the line between myth and history, suggesting that the ruler's divine heritage was not only a matter of ideology, but an assertion of a tangible connection to beings of immense power. The question arises, what became of this sacred bloodline? While much of Sumerian civilization eventually fell to invading empires, some researchers suggest that fragments of this lineage survived, dispersed into new dynasties and cultures. The idea that select families carried the blood of the gods into subsequent civilizations, through Babylon, Assyria, and even into later Middle Eastern and European lineages, is a tantalizing possibility. If true, it implies that the influence of the Anunnaki did not vanish with the collapse of Sumer, but continued quietly, shaping human history from behind the veil of legend and tradition. Ultimately, the concept of a sacred bloodline challenges our understanding of power, authority, and human potential. It is a story in which genetics, divinity, and destiny intertwine, where kingship is more than governance, and where knowledge is preserved not in libraries alone, but in the very bodies of those chosen to inherit it. As we examine the traces left behind, we are invited to consider the possibility that human civilization may have been shaped by more than human hands, that the Anunnaki's influence was not fleeting but encoded in blood, guiding the course of history in ways we are only beginning to glimpse. This sacred lineage is not merely an artifact of myth. It is a key to understanding the Anunnaki's enduring presence in human civilization. By tracing the bloodline, following the genealogies, and interpreting the symbols left behind, we uncover a narrative of control, knowledge, and cosmic design. And as we move forward into the deeper mysteries of Enki, Enlil, and the divine politics of the gods, it becomes increasingly clear that the story of the Anunnaki is not just a legend of the past. It is a hidden framework that continues to ripple through the ages, shaping humanity in subtle, extraordinary ways. Among the many tales of the Anunnaki, none is as compelling or as influential as the story of Enki and Enlil, the cosmic siblings whose rivalry shaped not only the destinies of gods, but the trajectory of humanity itself. These two figures are more than mythic archetypes. They are central characters in Sumerian cosmology, representing opposing forces of governance, knowledge, and control. Enlil, the god of air and authority, is depicted as stern, commanding, and unwavering in his sense of order. Enki, the god of water, wisdom, and creation, is cunning, compassionate, and more attuned to human welfare. Their relationship is one of tension, negotiation, and conflict, with consequences that ripple across the earliest chapters of civilization. The myths describe Enlil as a ruler who demanded obedience and imposed structure. He is often credited with the creation of city-states, defining boundaries, and establishing systems of law and hierarchy. To Enlil, order was paramount. Humans were tools to implement his vision, laborers to be directed, and subjects to be controlled. In many stories, he punishes humans and lesser gods alike when rules are broken, demonstrating the uncompromising nature of authority. Enlil's influence, however, was not solely tyrannical. By imposing structure, he enabled civilizations to flourish, providing a framework for governance, agriculture, and societal development. The paradox of Enlil is clear. His strict control created the conditions for human advancement, yet it also sowed seeds of fear, rebellion, and resentment. Enki, by contrast, embodies ingenuity and subtle manipulation. He is a patron of humans, teaching them agriculture, medicine, and craft. Where Enlil imposed law, Enki offered guidance. Where Enlil demanded obedience, Enki encouraged innovation. In some myths, Enki secretly intervenes to protect humans from Enlil's wrath, even defying his brother's decrees to ensure the survival and growth of humanity. These stories suggest that Enki's actions were strategic, aimed at preserving a delicate balance between divine control and human autonomy. He is portrayed as both teacher and trickster, a figure whose wisdom allows humans to thrive, even under the watchful eyes of the Anunnaki hierarchy. The conflict between the two brothers is more than familial discord. It mirrors the dynamics of power on Earth. Scholars and theorists alike have noted that the stories of Enki and Enlil reflect the division of authority in early Sumerian civilization. Enlil's city of Nippur served as a religious and political center, while Enki's domain in Eridu was associated with knowledge, creativity, and technology. The tug-of-war between these centers, mythologically represented as a cosmic struggle, may also reflect real political tensions among early Sumerian city-states. This narrative suggests that the Anunnaki were not passive overseers, but active participants in shaping the course of human governance, directing alliances, and influencing conflicts from behind a divine veil. Their rivalry also carries deep symbolic meaning. Enlil represents the principle of control, hierarchy, and order, necessary for the development of structured society but prone to rigidity and oppression. Enki embodies adaptability, creativity, and subtle guidance, reflecting a more flexible approach to influence and leadership. Humans caught between these forces are depicted as beneficiaries, victims, and sometimes co-conspirators. By presenting the divine as divided, the myths convey a complex worldview in which power is not absolute, and human destiny is intertwined with the machinations of celestial beings. This duality also introduces the idea that knowledge and power are inseparable from responsibility, and that the choices of rulers, divine or mortal, can shape the fate of civilizations. The myths further suggest that the Anunnaki, through their rivalry, may have influenced not only societal structure, but the very evolution of humanity. Enki is often credited with the creation or enhancement of humans, suggesting genetic intervention or selective development. Enlil, while authoritative, also plays a role in shaping the population, sometimes culling or testing humanity to maintain order and adherence to divine laws. These narratives hint at a sophisticated understanding of control, genetics, and governance that is astonishing for a civilization that existed thousands of years ago. The conflict between the brothers, therefore, is not merely symbolic. It may encode the memory of real events, interventions, and decisions that had profound consequences for the development of human society. The story of Enki and Enlil is also intertwined with the myths of the flood, a cataclysmic event that appears across multiple cultures. In Sumerian texts, Enlil is often depicted as the instigator of the deluge, seeking to punish humanity for transgressions, while Enki acts as protector, guiding a select few to safety and ensuring the continuity of knowledge and civilization. This dynamic reinforces the idea that the Anunnaki operated with both authority and strategy, capable of devastating intervention while simultaneously safeguarding the seeds of progress. The flood is not merely a story of divine wrath. It is a narrative that illustrates the balance of power, the consequences of rebellion, and the preservation of a chosen lineage. The implications of this sibling rivalry extend far beyond myth. By understanding the roles of Enki and Enlil, we glimpse a system of influence that may have been mirrored in the political and dynastic decisions of early human societies. Their interventions, guided by principles of hierarchy, knowledge, and selective protection, could have shaped the very course of history, determining which cities flourished, which dynasties endured, and which knowledge survived through the ages. This perspective reframes history as a theater not solely of human ambition, but of interaction with beings whose abilities, intentions, and rivalries left lasting imprints on civilization. Even in art and iconography, the contrast between the brothers is evident. Enlil is often depicted with symbols of authority, crowns, scepters, and imposing garments, while Enki is shown with water, flowing streams, and serpents, symbolizing wisdom, fluidity, and life-giving force. These visual cues reinforce their respective domains and influence, offering a glimpse into how the Sumerians understood power, morality, and divine responsibility. They also suggest that the myths were a deliberate teaching tool, encoding lessons about leadership, ethics, and the balance between control and creativity. Ultimately, the story of Enki and Enlil is a story of duality, control and freedom, order and innovation, judgment and mercy. It reflects a civilization's attempt to understand the forces that shaped its existence, both seen and unseen. It reminds us that power is complex, that knowledge can be both a gift and a weapon, and that humanity's earliest myths may carry echoes of events, interventions, and rivalries far beyond ordinary comprehension. In tracing the paths of these cosmic siblings, we begin to understand the delicate balance that governed early civilization, the delicate tension between obedience and ingenuity, punishment and protection, dominance and guidance. The narrative of Enki and Enlil is not just a myth. It is a window into the world of the Anunnaki, offering clues about their priorities, their influence, and the ways in which they may have shaped the very foundation of human society. It is within this tension, between rivalry and collaboration, that we glimpse the hidden threads of history, the subtle hand of the gods, and the origins of a lineage whose legacy continues to intrigue and mystify even today. The Sumerians left behind a legacy written in clay, a record of their civilization that continues to astound scholars and mystics alike. Tens of thousands of cuneiform tablets, some meticulously preserved for millennia, offer glimpses into a world where humans and gods intertwined, where knowledge was sacred, and where secrets were encoded in text, symbol, and ritual. Among these artifacts are instructions, myths, genealogies, and astronomical charts, but hidden within them are hints of a deeper, more forbidden knowledge, wisdom that may have been intended only for those chosen to receive it. The Sumerians themselves called it me, a term that could be interpreted as divine laws, sacred truths, or even secret powers handed down from the Anunnaki. These texts reveal a civilization far more advanced than most historians have imagined. Some tablets describe mathematical concepts, including calculations of planetary movements, that align with modern astronomy. Others record methods of metallurgy, irrigation, and medicine that, for the era, seem astonishingly sophisticated. At the heart of these achievements, many theorists argue, lies the hand of the Anunnaki, who were said to have imparted knowledge selectively to chosen individuals. Unlike ordinary humans, these select recipients were trained in esoteric wisdom, learning the principles of creation, the forces of the cosmos, and the manipulation of life itself. This knowledge, carefully guarded and coded, was not for the masses. It was the privilege of those with the sacred bloodline, the descendants of the gods. Some of the most enigmatic texts are the creation myths. The Enuma Elish, the Atrahasis, and various Sumerian accounts describe the origins of humanity, the role of the Anunnaki, and the intricate hierarchy of divine authority. Humans are portrayed as laborers, created to serve, yet endowed with potential, intelligence, and the ability to learn from their celestial patrons. Within these stories, subtle hints suggest advanced understanding of genetics, engineering, and social organization. Modern scholars often interpret these passages symbolically, yet their precision raises questions. How could a civilization so ancient articulate concepts that resonate with modern science unless guided by superior knowledge? In addition to mythological texts, the Sumerians preserved records that were highly technical, meant to guide ritual, agriculture, and governance. Astronomical charts, for instance, detail the movement of stars and planets with extraordinary accuracy. These charts were not only tools for observation, but possibly for alignment with celestial cycles, perhaps even communication or synchronization with beings beyond Earth. Religious texts describe ritual practices that encode cosmological principles, suggesting that the Sumerians understood the universe in ways that extended beyond the visible, tangible world. Every tablet, every inscription carries layers of meaning, the literal, the symbolic, and the esoteric. One particularly intriguing aspect of these texts is the notion of hidden knowledge. The Sumerians themselves seem to understand that some truths were dangerous if revealed to the uninitiated. Certain tablets and inscriptions are fragmented, obscure, or encoded in ways that prevent casual understanding. This intentional obscurity implies a culture of secrecy, where wisdom was compartmentalized, reserved for elites, and protected from misuse. Some researchers argue that the Anunnaki may have instructed humans to preserve knowledge in this way, ensuring that only those of the sacred bloodline could access the most potent teachings. Knowledge, in this sense, became both a gift and a weapon, a tool of empowerment for the chosen and a source of control over the rest. Beyond practical knowledge, the texts hint at metaphysical and cosmological wisdom. They describe the forces that govern the universe, the movement of celestial bodies, and the interplay between humans, gods, and the natural world. The Anunnaki, as the text suggests, possessed insights into the creation and manipulation of life, the secrets of fertility, and even the nature of consciousness. Such knowledge, encoded in myths and instructions, may have been the foundation of the sacred bloodline's extraordinary abilities. Kings, priests, and scholars who inherited this wisdom were not only rulers in a political sense. They were custodians of cosmic secrets, mediators between Earth and the heavens. The Sumerians also left behind mathematical and architectural texts that imply a sophisticated understanding of geometry, astronomy, and engineering principles. Some ziggurats and temples were constructed with precise alignments to stars and constellations, reflecting a deep understanding of celestial mechanics. The placement of these structures may not have been purely ceremonial. They could have been markers, observatories, or even energy centers designed to harmonize with cosmic forces. In this sense, the sacred knowledge of the Anunnaki was not abstract. It was applied, tangible, and intertwined with the fabric of civilization. Perhaps most compelling of all are the hints that the Anunnaki's wisdom included manipulation of life itself. Some tablets describe humans as being shaped by the gods, with the implication of selective creation or genetic intervention. While controversial, these passages align with the broader narrative of sacred bloodline. Certain humans were elevated above others, designed to inherit divine knowledge, and equipped with skills and attributes beyond the ordinary. The careful preservation of these texts suggests that the Sumerians were aware of their extraordinary significance, safeguarding knowledge that could alter the course of civilization if properly understood or misused. The tension between revealed and hidden knowledge is central to the story of the Anunnaki. On one hand, they taught humanity essential skills for survival and advancement. On the other, they withheld secrets, encoded them in enigmatic texts, and entrusted them only to those who were worthy. This dynamic created a civilization of remarkable achievement, yet one in which mystery, secrecy, and reverence for the unknown remained ever present. For modern researchers and seekers, the Sumerian texts are a labyrinth, part history, part myth, part instruction manual for forces beyond ordinary comprehension. To read the Sumerian tablets is to glimpse a world where humanity brushed against the divine, where knowledge was both a gift and a burden, and where the Anunnaki's influence was encoded in every aspect of civilization. The secrets contained within these texts hint at lost technologies, advanced astronomy, and the very blueprint of life itself. And while much has been lost, fragmented, or obscured over millennia, the surviving tablets are a testament to a civilization that understood the power of knowledge, the danger of revelation, and the enduring legacy of those who walked among the gods. In exploring these ancient texts, we begin to understand the true scope of the Anunnaki's influence. Their wisdom was not casual. It was deliberate, structured, and preserved for those who carried the sacred bloodline. The tablets, inscriptions, and myths form a mosaic of forbidden knowledge, a story of power, control, and cosmic design that reaches across millennia. It is within these texts that we find the hidden narrative of civilization itself, a narrative that challenges conventional history and invites us to reconsider the boundaries between myth, reality, and the extraordinary potential of human existence. Beyond myths and tablets, beyond the rituals and monuments, lies a question that has fascinated scholars, mystics, and theorists for centuries. Did the Anunnaki leave something more tangible behind, something encoded in the very essence of humanity itself? Among the most provocative ideas is that of a sacred genetic legacy, a royal bloodline that carries traces of these otherworldly beings. This is not a metaphorical inheritance of power or authority, but a literal one, embedded within DNA, passed down through selected lineages, and perhaps even surviving to the present day. The notion is extraordinary, but the evidence, scattered across texts, myths, and modern speculation, invites consideration, if only for the boldness of the claim. Sumerian mythology describes humans as creations of the gods, shaped from clay and imbued with life through divine intervention. Some interpretations suggest these stories may encode a memory of genetic manipulation, a deliberate act of hybridization between the Anunnaki and early humans. The results of this intervention would have been significant: a subset of humans elevated above their peers, not only in intellect and skill, but in their connection to cosmic knowledge. Kings, priests, and select scholars may have been carriers of this hybridized lineage, the living embodiment of divine authority, capable of accessing wisdom, technology, and insight far beyond the capacity of ordinary people. The idea of a genetic legacy aligns with the broader concept of sacred bloodline. Sumerian kings were not merely symbolic figures. Their legitimacy rested on claims of divine descent. Names, genealogies, and dynastic records meticulously traced ancestry back to the Anunnaki, reinforcing the notion that some humans were set apart from birth. This lineage was more than ceremonial, it was functional. Those who carried it may have been trained to wield knowledge, navigate political structures, and even manipulate the physical world in ways that seem almost supernatural. Across time, the same principle appears in other civilizations, from pharaohs claiming descent from Ra to emperors in Asia asserting heavenly ancestry, suggesting a recurring theme that blood itself can be a vessel for power, wisdom, and influence. Modern interpretations of genetics lend an additional layer of intrigue. While there is no verified scientific evidence of extraterrestrial DNA, the concept of inherited traits, selective breeding, and epigenetics provides a framework to imagine how such a lineage might persist. Just as certain traits are preserved through generations, so too could attributes, knowledge, or predispositions, encoded in subtle ways that are difficult to measure or recognize. In this context, the idea of a royal bloodline is not mere legend. It is a sophisticated theory that suggests intentional preservation of human-alien hybrid traits, ensuring that the Anunnaki's influence would continue long after their physical presence had vanished from Earth. Texts hint at this concept obliquely. References to humans chosen by the gods, endowed with wisdom, or marked by divine favor, may be veiled descriptions of those carrying this hybrid genetic inheritance. These were not random selections, but carefully orchestrated pairings designed to propagate the sacred line. By controlling reproduction, lineage, and access to knowledge, the Anunnaki could ensure that their influence endured through generations, encoded in both the structure of society and the very fabric of human biology. In this sense, the royal bloodline was both an instrument of power and a repository of forbidden knowledge, a living testament to the presence of beings from stars. Evidence from comparative mythology also supports this notion. Across cultures, myths repeatedly describe semi-divine rulers, extraordinary heroes, or humans born with godlike abilities. The similarities are striking. In Mesopotamia, kings descended from the Anunnaki. In Egypt, pharaohs were the sons of Ra. In India, epic texts describe divine human hybrids. And in the Americas, legends tell of gods who walked among humans, granting special gifts to chosen individuals. Could these myths be distant echoes of a shared reality, a memory of interactions with beings whose influence left both cultural and biological imprints? The consistency of these stories across time and geography suggests more than coincidence, hinting at a hidden, universal understanding of blood as a conduit for divine inheritance. The sacred bloodline may also explain the persistence of elite families throughout history. From ancient dynasties to modern aristocracies, there's a recurring pattern of concentration of power, wealth, and influence within select lineages. Some theorists speculate that these families are the hidden heirs of the Anunnaki, carriers of knowledge and traits passed down through millennia. While mainstream history attributes this persistence to politics, economics, or social strategy, the alternative view suggests a more profound connection, one rooted in the genetic and spiritual legacy of beings who once ruled the earth. Artifacts and symbols add weight to this possibility. Sumerian iconography often depicts kings with attributes associated with the gods: elongated skulls, wings, divine regalia, and celestial symbols. These images may serve as markers, indicating not only authority but inheritance, a visual acknowledgement of a sacred lineage that blends human and Anunnaki traits. Even rituals of initiation, coronation, and priesthood were designed to reinforce the connection between blood, power, and knowledge, embedding the sacred line within both culture and ceremony. The concept of a genetic legacy also raises profound questions about human potential. If certain individuals were indeed carriers of a hybrid lineage, it suggests that human evolution may not have been entirely natural, that deliberate interventions guided the course of development. It implies that knowledge, leadership, and innovation were not merely the product of circumstance, but encoded within select individuals, waiting to be expressed and preserved across generations. This perspective reframes our understanding of history, human ability, and the very nature of our species, challenging the assumption that we are solely the product of random evolution. Yet, much of this remains hidden, veiled in myth, metaphor, and selective record-keeping. The Anunnaki, if they existed as described, were careful to obscure the most potent aspects of their legacy. Only those deemed worthy, those carrying the sacred bloodline, could access the full spectrum of knowledge and power. For the rest, fragments remained, stories, symbols, rituals, echoes of a presence that shaped human civilization but left its most intimate secrets well guarded. Ultimately, the idea of the Anunnaki's genetic code is more than a theory. It is a lens through which to reinterpret human history. It suggests that the achievements, leadership, and even the extraordinary myths of our ancestors may have been influenced by a lineage that transcends ordinary human experience. Whether viewed as literal, symbolic, or somewhere in between, the notion of a sacred bloodline connects the realms of mythology, history, and potential science, hinting at a hidden legacy that continues to resonate, unseen but undeniable, in the very essence of humanity. Scattered across the ancient lands of Mesopotamia are remnants of a civilization that seem ordinary at first glance, but conceal secrets that have baffled historians and archaeologists for centuries. Ziggurats rise like stone pyramids toward the sky, their step terraces forming colossal structures that dominate the landscape. Palaces and temples, now crumbled and silent, once pulsed with the rituals of kings and priests who claimed descent from the Anunnaki. These constructions were more than mere buildings. They were coded statements of power, centers of knowledge, and perhaps even mechanisms to channel energies or communicate with beings beyond the earth. Every brick, every alignment, and every inscription carries whispers of a civilization guided by forces we are only beginning to perceive. The ziggurats themselves are especially intriguing. Unlike simple mounds or defensive fortifications, their design suggests astronomical sophistication. The tiers, carefully calculated, often align with celestial events, the solstices, equinoxes, and the rising of certain stars. Some researchers speculate that these structures were intended as observatories or as symbolic stairways to the heavens, enabling the Anunnaki, or their human descendants, to interact with cosmic forces. Rituals performed on these terraces may have been intended to harness energy, transmit knowledge, or mark the presence of divine power. The architectural precision implies an understanding of geometry, astronomy, and engineering that surpasses what we would expect from early humans, hinting at the guidance or interference of otherworldly beings. Temples, too, offer evidence of hidden purpose. Within these sacred spaces, priests conducted ceremonies that were highly structured, often requiring knowledge passed down from the Anunnaki. These rituals may have encoded cosmological principles, aligning human activity with the movements of planets and stars. Some chambers appear to have been deliberately hidden or restricted, accessible only to initiates, suggesting that sacred knowledge was preserved in physical spaces as well as in texts. The layout of these temples, their orientation, and even the symbolic motifs carved into their walls indicate a civilization deeply attuned to forces beyond the observable, blending spiritual reverence with practical instruction from the gods themselves. Archaeological artifacts reinforce the idea of a hidden legacy. Cylinder seals, statues, and reliefs depict beings with unusual features, elongated heads, wings, or hybrid forms, interacting with humans in ways that suggest hierarchy and instruction. These objects may have served as educational tools, symbolic reminders of authority, or even markers of bloodline affiliation. Some researchers argue that the presence of these symbols across multiple sites implies a coordinated effort to preserve the memory of the Anunnaki and their influence, reinforcing the connection between divine lineage, sacred knowledge, and human governance. Subterranean structures add another layer of mystery. Beneath many Sumerian sites, archaeologists have discovered tunnels, chambers, and hidden corridors whose purpose remains unclear. Some speculate that these spaces were storage areas for sacred texts, rituals, or artifacts. Others suggest they may have been laboratories or repositories for advanced knowledge, places where the Anunnaki or their descendants conducted experiments, monitored human development, or preserved genetic secrets. The very act of hiding these structures implies that the knowledge contained within was considered too powerful or too dangerous for general access, reinforcing the notion of a privileged, chosen group entrusted with the legacy of the gods. Cities themselves were built with meticulous care, reflecting not only practicality but cosmic alignment. The arrangement of streets, temples, and public spaces appears to follow patterns that resonate with astronomical observations and symbolic principles. Some scholars argue that the design of Sumerian cities functioned as living maps, encoding information about celestial cycles, energy flows, and sacred geometry. If this is true, it suggests that the Anunnaki, or those carrying their bloodline, had the capacity to encode complex knowledge into the very layout of civilization, leaving behind a blueprint that could guide humanity in both practical and spiritual dimensions. Even artifacts that appear mundane at first glance may hold hidden significance. Pottery, inscriptions, and ritual objects often carry symbolic motifs: serpents, wings, stars, or abstract geometric forms. Some researchers propose that these are not merely decorative but encode messages, instructions, or markers of sacred knowledge, designed to be understood only by initiates or those of divine lineage. In this way, the material culture of Sumeria serves as a silent testimony, a repository of wisdom subtly woven into daily life, architecture, and religious practice. The hidden cities and temples suggest a deliberate duality, one public and one private, one visible and one concealed. The general population participated in agriculture, trade, and worship, while the sacred spaces, rituals, and hidden structures preserve the knowledge and influence of the Anunnaki for a select few. This division mirrors the tension seen in myths, the interplay between control and guidance, secrecy and revelation, human agency and divine oversight. It is within these hidden spaces that the secrets of the royal bloodline, advanced knowledge, and cosmic understanding were likely preserved, awaiting discovery by those perceptive enough to read the clues left behind. Even the locations of these structures hint at a deliberate strategy. Many are situated near natural resources, rivers, minerals, and fertile lands. Yet their placement also suggests symbolic significance, connecting earthly domains with celestial patterns. The alignment of ziggurats, temples, and palaces with star systems may indicate an understanding of cosmology that is far more sophisticated than the conventional timeline of human scientific development allows. Some theorists argue that these sites functioned as nodes in a network, a web of influence connecting the Anunnaki, their human descendants, and the broader cosmos, integrating architecture, knowledge, and power into a unified system. Ultimately, The hidden cities and forbidden temples of Sumer are more than archaeological curiosities. They are enduring evidence of a civilization guided by forces beyond ordinary comprehension. They speak to a deliberate preservation of sacred knowledge, encoded in stone, clay, and space itself, accessible only to those deemed worthy. They suggest that the Anunnaki's presence was not fleeting, but woven into the very infrastructure of human civilization, a legacy that continues to whisper through ruins, artifacts, and myths millennia later. In exploring these remnants, we are invited to imagine a world in which humanity was not alone, a world in which gods walked among men, guiding, instructing, and shaping civilization in profound ways. Every temple, every ziggurat, every hidden corridor is a testament to this presence, a silent archive of the Anunnaki's influence and the sacred knowledge entrusted to their chosen humans. The cities may have fallen, the temples crumbled, but the imprint of this otherworldly guidance endures, waiting for those who are willing to see, interpret, and perhaps uncover the secrets deliberately hidden in plain sight. The story of the Anunnaki does not remain confined to the flat plains of Sumer or the river valleys of Mesopotamia. Across the ancient world, from distant continents to isolated civilizations, strikingly similar myths suggest a shared memory of beings who descended from the heavens, imparted knowledge, and interacted with humanity in profound ways. These cross-cultural echoes invite a startling possibility. The Anunnaki, or their archetypal counterparts, may have influenced civilizations globally, leaving behind a pattern of mythology, ritual, and hidden wisdom that transcends geography and time. In Egypt, for example, the pharaohs claimed divine origin, asserting descent from the sun god Ra. Temples, pyramids, and obelisks were aligned with stars, reflecting a sophisticated understanding of astronomy that parallels Sumerian practices. Some researchers argue that these similarities are not coincidental. The Anunnaki, or beings of comparable power, may have traveled or communicated knowledge across regions, guiding the formation of early kingdoms and preserving a sacred understanding of cosmology, architecture, and governance. The symbolism of Egyptian gods with elongated heads, hybrid forms, or celestial associations echoes Sumerian iconography, suggesting a common archetype or even direct influence from shared source. In the Americas, ancient civilizations such as the Maya, Aztec, and Inca also tell of gods descending from the sky, teaching humans agriculture, astronomy, and ritual knowledge. The Maya, for instance, developed an extraordinarily precise calendar system, calculated the movements of planets, and built cities aligned with celestial phenomena. Similarly, Mesoamerican codices describe gods who imparted laws and knowledge, echoing the role of the Anunnaki in Sumeria. Even in far-off cultures of South America, myths speak of creators who walked among humans, leaving behind sacred lineages and architectural marvels. These parallels raise the question, could knowledge have traveled with these beings, intentionally shaping civilizations thousands of miles apart? In India, the Vedic texts describe Devas and Asuras, celestial beings engaged in cosmic struggles that bear uncanny resemblance to the tales of Enki and Enlil. The Devas, often benevolent and instructive, mirror the role of Enki, while the Asuras, powerful and authoritarian, reflect the attributes of Enlil. These narratives contain elaborate cosmologies, advanced astronomical knowledge, and descriptions of divine-human interaction. Some researchers interpret these texts as allegorical, while others suggest that they preserve an encoded memory of ancient encounters with beings who influenced human civilization, passing down wisdom through both myth and sacred bloodlines. Across Europe, Celtic and Nordic myths tell of godlike beings who mingled with humans, shaping their destiny and establishing sacred dynasties. In Ireland, for instance, Kings claimed descent from Tuatha De Danann, a race of divine beings who taught humans agriculture, craftsmanship, and knowledge of the stars. Similarly, Norse mythology describes the Aesir and Vanir, celestial entities who engaged in both cooperation and conflict with humans. These stories, when viewed alongside Sumerian and Egyptian myths, form a pattern. Across continents and epochs, humans preserve the memory of beings who descended from the sky, imparting knowledge, guiding development, and influencing the evolution of society. Even in East Asia, echoes of divine ancestry emerge. Chinese myths recount the Yellow Emperor and other semi-divine rulers who brought civilization, medicine, and governance to humanity. These figures are celebrated as teachers, innovators, and intermediaries between heaven and earth. Their stories, like those of the Sumerian kings, suggest a lineage that blends divine wisdom with human leadership, perpetuating knowledge across generations and maintaining structures of power rooted in sacred authority. What is remarkable is not just the presence of these myths, but the specific similarities in roles, symbolism, and patterns of instruction. Across continents, we find recurring motifs: beings descending from the sky, imparting knowledge, guiding the first rulers, and establishing sacred lineages. Many myths also describe conflict among these celestial beings, echoing the rivalry of Enki and Enlil, suggesting that humans were not merely passive recipients, but participants in a larger cosmic drama. These similarities imply either a shared archetypal consciousness or the influence of real, extraordinary beings who left an imprint on multiple civilizations. The spread of these myths also raises intriguing questions about the transmission of knowledge. Did the Anunnaki, or entities like them, travel across continents, leaving behind centers of learning, sacred sites, and symbolic systems that could be interpreted by humans over millennia? Or did their influence disseminate through intermediaries, human lineages carrying the sacred bloodline and preserving knowledge in ritual, architecture, and oral tradition? Either scenario implies an astonishing level of foresight and strategy, a deliberate effort to shape human development on a planetary scale. Artifacts further reinforce these connections. Similar motifs, wings, celestial symbols, elongated figures, and hybrid forms, appear in Sumerian, Egyptian, Mesoamerican, and Asian art. The recurrence of these symbols may signify a shared understanding of divine authority, cosmic order, and sacred bloodlines. They hint at a communication system that transcends language, geography, and culture, preserving knowledge in visual form for those capable of deciphering it. These artistic echoes suggest that the influence of the Anunnaki was not localized, but planetary, leaving clues across civilizations for future generations to uncover. Even architecture reflects these global connections. Pyramids in Egypt, step pyramids in Mesopotamia, ziggurats, and Mesoamerican temples share striking structural and symbolic similarities. While practical explanations for their construction exist, the alignment with celestial bodies, the use of sacred geometry, and the integration of ritual spaces indicate knowledge that surpasses ordinary human capabilities for the period. Could these structures be monuments to memory, markers of a hidden network, or tools for maintaining contact with the Anunnaki? They are evidence of a shared methodology, one that combines science, spirituality, and divine influence. Ultimately, the global myths of sky beings, sacred bloodlines, and hidden knowledge invite us to reconsider the scope of the Anunnaki's influence. They suggest that what began in Sumer may have extended across the world, embedding itself in culture, governance, and spirituality. The Anunnaki may not have been confined to a single civilization. Their legacy appears encoded in the myths, art, and monuments of multiple civilizations, preserved for millennia as a reminder of a hidden, extraordinary influence on human history. These cross-cultural echoes also reinforce the concept of a sacred lineage. Across continents, select families, priesthoods, and rulers were tasked with preserving knowledge and authority, maintaining continuity with the divine, and safeguarding secrets from the masses. The repetition of this pattern hints at an organized, deliberate system, one designed to preserve the influence of beings whose presence shaped civilization itself. As we trace these patterns, a broader picture emerges, a hidden network of influence, memory, and legacy that stretches across the ancient world, waiting for those who are willing to see beyond the surface and connect the threads of an astonishing global story. Beyond myths, bloodlines, and sacred temples, the Anunnaki are often linked to a realm that seems to straddle both legend and impossible technology. The texts, reliefs, and artifacts left behind suggest that these beings were not merely spiritual guides, but possessed knowledge and capabilities far beyond the ordinary human scope of their era. Whether through advanced machinery, celestial navigation, or methods that we can barely comprehend today, the Anunnaki appear in records as masters of tools, engineering, and sciences that have since been lost or deliberately obscured from human memory. The question that lingers is whether these technologies were divine, extraterrestrial, or a combination of both, and what traces of them may still survive, hidden in plain sight. Cuneiform tablets and Sumerian records describe processes and devices that hint at advanced engineering and mechanical ingenuity. Some passages refer to structures that could manipulate water, metals, and energy in ways that seem almost magical. These are not mere myths of irrigation or metallurgy. The texts suggest a precision and methodology that surpasses contemporary understanding. One striking example is the description of flying devices or chariots of the gods, said to traverse the heavens and even descend to earth. Whether literal or symbolic, such accounts indicate an awareness of aerial technology long before humans are believed to have achieved it, suggesting that the Anunnaki may have possessed the ability to navigate the skies with sophistication. Metalwork and mining are other areas in which the Anunnaki's influence is apparent. Sumerian myths consistently link these beings to the extraction of precious materials, particularly gold. The texts describe vast operations, organized labor, and knowledge of smelting techniques that allowed metals to be used in ways far beyond the practical needs of the time. Some theorists suggest that the Anunnaki were engaged in systematic mining, possibly for purposes we can only speculate upon: energy generation, experimentation, or trade among celestial civilizations. The sophistication of these operations implies a combination of technology, organization, and specialized knowledge that ordinary humans could not have developed independently. Temples and ziggurats themselves may have incorporated technology in their design. Architectural alignments, geometric precision, and construction methods suggest a functional understanding of forces beyond gravity, vibration, and acoustics. Certain chambers appear to be intentionally designed to resonate, amplify, or focus energy, though for what purpose remains speculative. Was this sacred ritual, practical engineering, or a form of communication with otherworldly beings? The very existence of these designs indicates that the Anunnaki, or those carrying their knowledge, possessed a comprehension of physical laws and their manipulation that challenges conventional historical narratives. Artifacts also hint at a mastery of complex instruments. Cylinder seals, reliefs, and carvings sometimes depict machinery, intricate vessels, and symbols that are difficult to interpret. Some researchers propose that these objects represent tools for energy manipulation, celestial observation, or even genetic experimentation. The recurring presence of such artifacts in sacred or restricted contexts implies that they were more than decorative. They were functional instruments, possibly accessible only to the initiates or to those of the sacred bloodline. The combination of practical application and secrecy underscores the deliberate preservation of Anunnaki knowledge and technology. Astronomical understanding is another domain where Anunnaki influence is evident. The Sumerians demonstrated a precise knowledge of planetary orbits, lunar cycles, and even the movement of distant celestial bodies. While modern science credits observation and calculation over centuries, the Sumerian charts suggest access to advanced knowledge, possibly transmitted directly from the Anunnaki. Some texts hint at tools or methods for tracking and predicting celestial events with a precision that exceeds expectations for the period. This knowledge may have been critical for agriculture, navigation, and ritual, but also raises the possibility that the Anunnaki themselves relied on sophisticated systems to monitor Earth, its inhabitants, and its resources. There are also tantalizing references to energy manipulation. Certain inscriptions speak of harnessing forces described metaphorically as light, fire, or celestial breath, sometimes in connection with gold, water, or sacred chambers. While the meaning of these terms is debated, they suggest that the Anunnaki understood principles of energy and its application in ways that appear lost to modern civilization. Whether these practices were symbolic, spiritual, or technological, they reflect a civilization, or guidance, capable of interacting with natural forces at a level that ordinary humans could barely perceive. Weapons, tools, and ceremonial devices also imply capabilities that surpass contemporary human technology. Some depictions show instruments capable of dramatic effects, sometimes described as beams, blasts, or transformative energy. While skeptics dismiss these as allegory, the consistency of the descriptions across texts and artifacts is striking. Could these represent a literal understanding of advanced technology, preserved in myth as metaphor to safeguard its secrets from uninitiated observers? If so, it suggests that the Anunnaki, or those they guided, maintained control over technologies that were both powerful and dangerous. Even more intriguing is the suggestion that the Anunnaki's technology was not merely functional but interactive, designed to augment human potential. Certain texts and myths imply that humans were trained to operate devices, understand symbols, or manipulate energies, effectively extending the capabilities of ordinary humans to levels comparable with their divine patrons. This deliberate instruction may have been limited to those of the sacred bloodline, ensuring that knowledge, power, and technological expertise remain concentrated within select families and priesthoods. Such selective dissemination reinforces the idea of a controlled evolution of civilization under the watchful eyes of these advanced beings. The preservation and eventual loss of this knowledge is equally fascinating. Many of the artifacts, texts, and structures have survived only partially, destroyed by time, conquest, or deliberate suppression. What remains is a tantalizing hint of a civilization that understood far more than mainstream history credits. The consistency of these records across thousands of years, combined with their precision and sophistication, suggests an intentional effort to encode knowledge in durable forms. Tablets, stone, architecture, capable of surviving millennia. This legacy challenges the assumption that ancient humans were primitive or isolated, pointing instead to guidance by beings who possessed extraordinary understanding and capabilities. Ultimately, the technological and scientific aspects of the Anunnaki mythos cannot be dismissed as mere fantasy. Whether literal or allegorical, the artifacts, inscriptions, and structures all point to a civilization that achieved mastery over forces that we're only beginning to comprehend. The combination of engineering, astronomy, energy manipulation, and selective transmission of knowledge paints a picture of beings, or human descendants carrying their guidance, who were capable of shaping the very course of civilization through science, ritual, and technology. The legacy of the Anunnaki, embedded in these traces, challenges conventional history, inviting us to reconsider not only the origins of human knowledge, but the possibility of a lost, extraordinary technology that may one day be rediscovered. Among the most captivating elements of Anunnaki mythology are the prophecies and warnings encoded in their texts, stories, and rituals. Far beyond tales of divine ancestry or extraordinary technology, these messages suggest an awareness of cycles, patterns, and events that would affect humanity long after the gods themselves had departed. The Sumerians spoke of periods of upheaval, celestial disturbances, and shifts in human civilization, often couched in symbolic language that blends cosmic observation with moral or spiritual instruction. These prophecies hint at a worldview in which the fate of humans is intertwined with cosmic forces, and in which the Anunnaki, through their bloodline or their preserved knowledge, left guidance for navigating these cycles. One recurring theme is the cyclical nature of time. The Sumerians did not see history as linear, but as a series of repeating epochs, each marked by the influence of the gods and the rise and fall of civilizations. Certain texts describe the return of the gods, or periods in which the heavens would once again intersect with Earth, events accompanied by natural cataclysms, societal upheavals, or shifts in human consciousness. These cycles were not merely predictive, they were instructive. By observing patterns in the skies, recording them in tablets, and encoding them in rituals, the Anunnaki provided humanity with tools to anticipate change, survive adversity, and align with cosmic rhythms. The prophecies also emphasize the importance of knowledge and morality. In Sumerian records, warnings are often linked to human behavior. The misuse of power, neglect of sacred laws, or failure to honor the divine balance could provoke calamities. Enki and Enlil, whose rivalry shaped much of early myth, are depicted not only as influencers of human destiny, but as arbiters of these moral and cosmic laws. The messages suggest that civilization itself is contingent upon adherence to principles that the Anunnaki established, principles that may govern technological, societal, and environmental stability. The warnings are not threats for their own sake. They're part of a system designed to maintain harmony between the heavens and earth. Some prophecies hint at celestial phenomena with dramatic implications. Descriptions of planetary alignments, cometary visits, and astronomical events recur in multiple texts. While the language is symbolic, the precision of observation suggests that the Sumerians, guided by the Anunnaki, understood events that could disrupt life on Earth. Scholars have debated whether these references correspond to real astronomical phenomena, such as asteroid passages or orbital cycles, or if they are metaphorical warnings about human choices. Regardless, the repetition of celestial themes across centuries indicates that the Anunnaki were deeply concerned with the alignment between the heavens and the well-being of humanity. The notion of selective survival is another key element of the prophecies. Just as certain humans were chosen to inherit the sacred bloodline, the texts imply that knowledge, preparation, and alignment with divine principles could determine which individuals or groups endured periods of upheaval. Flood myths, for instance, are not merely stories of punishment. They are survival manuals, detailing how those attuned to Anunnaki guidance could preserve life, knowledge, and civilization itself. The emphasis on preparation, understanding, and adherence to cosmic law reinforces the idea that the Anunnaki sought to maintain order across generations, guiding humanity through cycles of challenge and transformation. Prophecies are also encoded in symbolic imagery. Reliefs, cylinder seals, and ritual objects often depict celestial events, hybrid beings, and cosmic forces interacting with humans. These images are not merely decorative. They are mnemonic devices designed to preserve understanding across generations. The recurrence of these symbols in temples, royal iconography, and sacred artifacts suggests that prophecy was intertwined with daily life, governance, and religious practice. It is as if the Anunnaki embedded warnings and guidance into the very culture of humanity, ensuring that the cycles of knowledge and survival would be recognized and respected. Some researchers interpret these prophecies as containing hidden timelines or advanced astronomical understanding. Texts hint at periods of cosmic alignment that coincide with major events in human history, suggesting a deep awareness of planetary cycles, orbital mechanics, and the potential consequences of celestial disturbances. Whether literal or metaphorical, these messages point to a civilization, or guiding beings, that saw time not only as a measurement of human activity, but as a canvas on which cosmic forces and mortal decisions intersected. The implications are profound. The Anunnaki may have understood not only the mechanics of the universe, but the responsibility of those with knowledge to act wisely within it. Beyond physical survival, the prophecies address the evolution of consciousness. Certain texts hint that humanity was intended to awaken to higher understanding, guided by the knowledge and influence of the Anunnaki. These warnings are often dual in nature. They caution against misuse of power and ignorance, yet they also promise growth, insight, and advancement for those who follow the divine blueprint. In this way, the prophecies are not purely catastrophic. They are aspirational, encouraging humanity to align with both cosmic law and the wisdom embedded in sacred bloodlines. The interplay between secrecy and revelation is central to these messages. Many prophecies were recorded in obscure or fragmented texts, accessible only to those initiated into the mysteries of the Anunnaki. This deliberate obfuscation ensured that knowledge was preserved for those capable of understanding it, while remaining protected from misuse. It reinforces the recurring theme that the Anunnaki's influence is both overt and hidden, guiding humanity through direct intervention in some cases, and through encoded wisdom in others. Only those attuned to the right signals, bloodline, ritual, or study, could decode the guidance and prepare for the challenges of the cycles. Ultimately, the prophecies and warnings of the Anunnaki serve as both historical record and philosophical framework. They emphasize the interconnectedness of human civilization, divine oversight, and cosmic order. They remind us that knowledge, morality, and awareness are intertwined, and that humanity's survival depends not only on physical resources, but on understanding, foresight, and alignment with universal principles. The messages, preserved across millennia, challenge modern assumptions about ancient civilization, inviting us to consider a hidden layer of guidance, intervention, and influence that has shaped the course of human history in ways we are only beginning to comprehend. Through these prophecies, the Anunnaki leave an enduring lesson that the cycles of time, the patterns of the cosmos, and the choices of humanity are all linked, and that survival, growth, and enlightenment are contingent upon recognizing and respecting these patterns. They serve as both a warning and a beacon, pointing to the possibility of hidden order, divine oversight, and the extraordinary potential that lies within those who are prepared to seek, understand, and act upon the wisdom left behind by beings whose legacy continues to whisper across the ages. Across the ancient world, royal families clung to their genealogies with a kind of sacred desperation. These long lists of fathers and sons, mothers and divine patrons were more than records of heritage. They were declarations of power, legitimacy, and cosmic alignment. When we examine these traditions closely, moving from the first cities of Sumer through the kingdoms that followed, a striking pattern emerges. Rulers did not merely claim descent from heroes or wise ancestors. They insisted their blood carried something older, something otherworldly. It is within this intricate web of royal lineages that we find echoes of the Anunnaki, threads of an ancient story woven into the fabric of empires that rose long after Sumer had fallen silent. Mesopotamian kings often trace their legitimacy back to the earliest rulers listed on the Sumerian king list, a document that links historical kings with mythic predecessors whose reigns stretched thousands of years. Even when political power shifted from Sumerian cities to Akkadian, Babylonian, or Assyrian dynasties, the theme of divine descent persisted. Kings described themselves not metaphorically, but explicitly as chosen, shaped, or born through the will of the gods. The most powerful rulers claimed they carried the breath, essence, or seed of the Anunnaki, a celestial inheritance believed to grant wisdom, authority, and a rightful claim to the throne. The Akkadian kings, under Sargon the Great, carried this idea forward with intensity. Sargon himself, rising from obscure origins, reshaped his narrative to include divine favor, presenting his mother as a priestess linked to the sacred tradition of the goddess Inanna. His grandson, Naram-Sin, went further, declaring himself a living god, the first Mesopotamian ruler to do so. His inscriptions depict him wearing the horned crown reserved for deities, suggesting that his bloodline had not merely been blessed by the Anunnaki. It had become indistinguishable from them. This was not a symbolic gesture. To the people of that era, it was the continuation of a lineage that transcended human boundaries. As centuries passed and empires rose on the ruins of their predecessors, the idea of a heavenly lineage remained central. The Babylonian kings, especially those under the rule of Hammurabi's dynasty, were depicted as shepherds chosen by the gods. Hammurabi himself claimed direct appointment by Marduk, but older myths suggest an even earlier inheritance, one that tied kingship to figures like Enki and Enlil. Babylonian scribes copied and preserved Sumerian texts with surprising reverence, reinforcing the idea that the divine bloodline continued through their monarchs, even if its original carriers had long vanished from the world stage. Further north, the Assyrian kings embraced this idea with equal force. Their royal inscriptions describe them as the literal brothers of the gods, offspring of Ashur, Ishtar, and other divine beings. Their temples housed relics, seals, and genealogies suggesting an unbroken thread of authority stretching back to antediluvian times. Assyrian kings, especially during the empire's zenith, portrayed themselves as the last living inheritors of the cosmic order established in the era when the Anunnaki supposedly walked among humankind. Their power was not only political, it was portrayed as biological. These traditions later intersected with the biblical world, creating one of the most intriguing puzzles in ancient history. In the Hebrew Bible, genealogies serve a similar role. They establish legitimacy and continuity. Figures like Nimrod, described as a mighty king who founded key Mesopotamian cities, tie the biblical narrative directly to the world of Sumer and Akkad. Nimrod's description is unusual, suggesting he was not just a ruler, but someone made mighty in a way that distinguished him from ordinary men. Some scholars have pointed to linguistic hints that Nimrod might echo older stories of kings with divine backing, perhaps even carrying echoes of ancient Mesopotamian bloodlines. This connection becomes deeper when considering traditions about Noah and his descendants. Post-flood biblical genealogies emphasize the preservation of a pure and ancient lineage, almost as if echoing the earlier Sumerian idea that kingship must be passed on from the survivors of a great deluge. In both traditions, those who survived seemed to carry something more than simple heritage. They carried a mandate, a memory, or perhaps, to some, a bloodline that predated the flood itself. As centuries unfolded, the idea of divine lineage migrated into entirely new cultural landscapes. The Egyptian pharaohs maintained a parallel belief in sacred blood, describing themselves as sons and daughters of the gods, often linked to Ra, Osiris, or Horus. While Egypt is culturally distinct from Sumer, the thematic resemblance is striking. Pharaohs underwent rituals meant to invoke celestial ancestry, and their coronation ceremonies described the activation of a divine essence inherited through their line. Research into early Egyptian dynasties reveals numerous references to the blood of the gods, suggesting a mythic structure that, while uniquely Egyptian, resonates with Mesopotamian concepts of inherited divine authority. In some speculative traditions, Egyptian rulers and Mesopotamian kings are described as distant branches of a single, older lineage, one that extended outward as civilization spread. Though mainstream historians view these connections as cultural parallels, alternative theories propose more literal ties, with ancient royal families intermarrying or sharing a common origin rooted in an even earlier civilization from which they all inherited mythic memory. Over time, these ideas did not disappear, they transformed. As empires fell, priesthoods dispersed, and oral traditions blended with new religions, the royal genealogies took on new forms. In the medieval world, several European royal houses began tracing their ancestry not only to biblical figures like David and Solomon, but, more subtly, to legendary kings said to have ruled in distant antiquity. Medieval manuscripts and later genealogical traditions claimed connections that stretched back to the ancient Near East, hinting at an unbroken line of sacred authority. One of the most intriguing examples lies in the legends surrounding the House of Solomon. Ethiopian tradition, preserved in texts like the Kabra Nagast, claims that Solomon fathered a son, Menelik, with the Queen of Sheba. Menelik, according to this account, carried both royal and divine legitimacy, establishing a dynasty that claimed descent not only from biblical kings, but from ancient blood that stretched back into pre-flood history. Though the story sits at the crossroads of myth and national identity, its resilience underscores how deeply rooted the idea of divine lineage had become across civilizations. In Europe, during the Middle Ages and Renaissance, noble families commissioned elaborate genealogies linking themselves to heroes of antiquity. Some claimed Trojan ancestry, others reached toward biblical patriarchs. But hidden within these genealogical webs were hints that certain families believed they guarded something older, knowledge, symbols, or even blood ties said to originate in the ancient Near East. The symbolism of dragons, stars, and serpents in heraldry often carried meanings older than the families themselves, suggesting the persistence of mythic memories tied to primordial ancestors. Alternative history researchers have long speculated that certain royal houses may have preserved ritual practices, esoteric knowledge, and coded genealogies pointing to a far older origin than official histories acknowledge. Some propose that bloodlines once described as divine became reframed in later eras as noble or aristocratic, their ancient meaning obscured by political and religious transformation. In the modern world, genealogical research, DNA studies, and the digitization of ancient records have reignited interest in these old traditions. While mainstream genetics does not support literal descent from gods, the fascination persists. People still search for connections to ancient kings, for traces of ancestry that link them to legendary rulers of Sumer, Egypt, or Israel. This search reflects not only a desire for prestige, but a deeper longing for connection to humanity's earliest stories. Stories in which bloodline was more than biology. It was destiny. When viewed together, these genealogical traditions, from Sumerian kings and Akkadian emperors to biblical patriarchs, pharaohs, and medieval royalty, form a vast tapestry. The threads weave through thousands of years of myth, memory, and political power. Whether interpreted symbolically, spiritually, or speculatively, they reveal an enduring human belief that the earliest rulers were not merely leaders, but bearers of something extraordinary, something inherited, something ancient, something that, in the eyes of countless generations, linked them to the very beings who shaped the first civilizations. It is in this intricate braid of stories, claims, and cultural echoes that the idea of an Anunnaki royal lineage survives, not in a single family, but in the collective memory of humanity, carried forward through the rulers who insisted they were more than human, and through the people who believed them. Across the ancient world, relics and objects have long acted as silent custodians of forgotten stories. They endure where memories fade, preserving fragments of worlds we can no longer fully access. In the case of the Anunnaki and the mystery of divine kingship, artifacts become more than museum pieces. They transform into clues, cryptic, symbolic, sometimes shockingly advanced, hinting at a lost chapter of human history. When examined closely, these relics whisper of a past where the boundaries between gods and humans were believed to blur, where rulers were not just administrators but conduits of celestial inheritance. In Mesopotamia, the earliest and most revealing artifacts are the cylinder seals, tiny stone cylinders intricately carved with scenes that often appear much larger in meaning than their size suggests. These seals were used to sign documents or mark ownership, but the images they bear speak of cosmic events, divine councils, and interactions between towering figures and humans. Some seals depict winged beings standing beside humans. Others show celestial maps with stars and planets arranged in ways that have sparked controversy. To a mainstream archaeologist, these images are mythological motifs of the time. To others, they appear like carefully encoded snapshots, perhaps preserving memories of advanced knowledge or encounters with beings beyond human origin. Regardless of interpretation, these seals remain among the most compelling pieces of physical evidence linking Mesopotamian rulers to gods they claimed as ancestors. The Epic of Gilgamesh, though written on clay tablets rather than carved on stone, is itself a kind of artifact, one whose content reshaped the world's understanding of ancient kingship. Gilgamesh is presented as 2/3 divine, 1/3 human, a description that raises more questions than answers. His superhuman strength, vast achievements, and relentless quest for immortality have been read as metaphors for human ambition. Yet some alternative scholars point to this unusual ratio, wondering if it reflects an ancient attempt to describe literal hybridity, an encoded reminder of a lineage that combined terrestrial and celestial elements. The tablets speak of forgotten technologies, the secrets of life and death, and interactions with beings like Utnapishtim who survived the Great Flood. Whether mythic or historical, the epic preserves an understanding of kingship as something rooted in a past where divine and mortal bloodlines intersected. Among the most enigmatic artifacts are the so-called star maps found in Mesopotamian ruins. Some depict constellations accurately. Others show arrangements that do not match modern skies. One of the most debated is a seal often cited for its image of what appears to be the solar system. Official scholars argue it is symbolic, not scientific. But those who study alternative interpretations see something startling. Planets arranged in a way that suggests knowledge not confirmed until millennia later. Critics argue that coincidence and stylization explain the resemblance, while proponents claim it is evidence of advanced astronomical understanding inherited from beings the Sumerians considered divine. The artifact itself remains silent, but its presence fuels the ongoing debate. Other relics are far more mysterious, resisting clear interpretation. Mesopotamian temples have yielded objects made of materials or crafted with techniques that seem unusually sophisticated for their era. Some are small and portable, others large and imposing, carved with symbols whose meanings remain uncertain. A few resemble mechanical components or ritual tools whose function cannot be fully explained. Whether ceremonial, symbolic, or functional, these items contribute to the narrative of a civilization that possessed knowledge beyond its apparent means, knowledge attributed to its gods. One artifact often discussed is a peculiar stone object discovered in multiple sites across the region. A conical, spindle-shaped stone with smooth surfaces and a polished finish. Some archaeologists classify it as a ritual item or decorative piece, but its design has led others to suggest it may have served a technical purpose long forgotten. Its repeated appearance across cultures hints at shared knowledge or shared inspiration, perhaps passed down through priesthoods or royal families who claimed access to divine wisdom. Equally intriguing are the depictions of the Tablet of Destinies, an object referenced in ancient texts as holding the power to control the fates of gods and humans alike. While no physical tablet has been conclusively identified, artistic representations show a rectangular or square object covered in inscriptions. Its significance in mythology is immense, suggesting authority, knowledge, and the ability to shape reality. Some researchers interpret it as a symbolic representation of legal authority, while others wonder if it could be a distant memory of a device, perhaps a repository of encoded knowledge, kept by a ruling class believed to be descended from the gods. The more one explores the relics of the ancient Near East, the more patterns begin to emerge. Many artifacts emphasize a connection between the rulers and the heavens. Bas-reliefs depict kings standing beside winged beings or receiving items from them, rods, rings, and other symbols of authority. These objects, often referred to as the rod and ring, appear repeatedly in Mesopotamian art. Scholars believe they represent concepts of justice and kingship. Alternative theorists suggest they may have been functional devices or symbolic representations of an ancient technology transmitted through divine intermediaries. Outside Mesopotamia, additional artifacts hint at a shared inheritance of symbols and knowledge. Egyptian relics depict pharaohs receiving the Ankh, a symbol of life, from gods who resemble the tall, elongated figures described in Sumerian texts. In the Levant, stone stelae show kings interacting with beings who stand on swirling cloud-like platforms, carrying objects that appear radiant or energized. While mainstream archaeology explains these similarities as cultural diffusion, others see them as remnants of a common source, a body of knowledge passed down through priest-kings who claimed descent from celestial beings. Some artifacts remain controversial, such as the fragments of stone spheres found in various Mesopotamian temple complexes. Their purpose is unknown, though speculation ranges from ceremonial use to components of ancient measuring systems. Their precision and uniformity raise questions about the level of technology required to create them. While no definitive link to the Anunnaki can be proven, their existence adds to the mosaic of enigmatic relics surrounding early kingship. Even the architecture of Mesopotamia speaks to the theme of inherited power. Ziggurats, with their layered, ascending structure, mimic the imagined stairways between earth and heaven. While not an artifact in the traditional sense, their construction reflects a worldview where rulers served as intermediaries, climbing toward the realm of the gods from whom they claim descent. Some theorists have suggested ziggurats may have housed ritual chambers or repositories of ancient knowledge, though excavation remains limited and conclusions remain speculative. As we sift through these artifacts, one truth becomes increasingly clear. The people of ancient Mesopotamia believed their rulers were tethered to a divine past. Whether one interprets these relics through a symbolic lens or a literal one, their existence testifies to a civilization obsessed with preserving the memory of divine kingship. Each seal, tablet, carving, and enigmatic object serves as a frozen moment, capturing the way ancient peoples perceive their place in the universe, as participants in a story far older than their cities or their empires. In the modern day, these artifacts continue to provoke wonder. They fuel debates, inspire theories, and challenge assumptions about the sophistication and beliefs of ancient cultures. Whether they reflect symbolic myth-making or the remnants of a forgotten encounter with beings the Sumerians called the Anunnaki, they remain powerful reminders that humanity's earliest civilizations did not see themselves as isolated or purely human. They saw themselves as heirs, keepers of a legacy bestowed by those who came before. whose presence was etched into stone and clay, waiting for future generations to rediscover. In the modern age, when science has replaced myth for most people and genetics has become the language through which we trace the story of humanity, there remains a quiet fascination with the idea that something unusual might linger in our DNA, some forgotten imprint, a hidden signature from a distant past. As laboratories decode genomes and genealogists map family trees, a question whispers at the edge of curiosity. If ancient civilizations believed in divine bloodlines, did they preserve that idea out of superstition, or was there something they sensed, something that we are only beginning to rediscover through science? Genetic research has traced humanity's origins across continents, revealing migrations, interbreeding events, and the branching complexity of our ancestral paths. Haplogroups, genetic markers passed down through large populations, form vast networks connecting millions of people. These markers tell a story of ancient clans, survival, movement, extinction, and rebirth. Yet even in this deeply scientific field, anomalies and unanswered questions remain. Some lineages appear suddenly in the record, with no clear developmental history. Others carry mutations that seem older than expected or appear in regions far from where they should be. These genetic puzzles become fertile ground for speculation about forgotten epochs and influences from cultures long vanished. In the context of ancient Mesopotamia and the question of Anunnaki lineage, attention often turns to rare haplogroups found in isolated pockets of the world. Some researchers point to unusual clusters in the Near East, particularly in regions once connected to Sumerian and Akkadian civilizations. Certain genetic signatures appear older than surrounding populations, as if descending from a group with a distinct ancestral line that branched separately from others early in human development. While mainstream genetics explains these patterns through population bottlenecks, migrations, or founder effects, alternative theorists wonder if these anomalies might be remnants of a lineage revered in ancient texts, one associated with divine beings or hybrid rulers. There are also individuals today who possess what geneticists call high heterozygosity, meaning they carry unusually diverse genetic material compared to the average person. High heterozygosity often reflects ancient origins or unique ancestry mixing. In rare cases, individuals have genetic variations not easily mapped to known prehistoric migrations. Those science attributes such variations to natural processes, those exploring the idea of ancient divine bloodlines see them as possible traces of something older and more enigmatic. Not evidence, perhaps, but whispers, faint echoes of a story preserved in biology. One of the most intriguing discussions arises around what geneticists describe as introgression, the presence of DNA in modern humans inherited from ancient beings who are not entirely like us. The most famous examples are Neanderthals and Denisovans, whose genes live on in millions of people. This discovery changed how scientists viewed human origins, revealing that humanity is not a single lineage, but a mosaic of ancient species. For those who consider the Anunnaki narrative, this opens a speculative doorway. If interbreeding with distinct hominin species is an accepted scientific fact, then the idea of hybridization with another type of being, symbolically interpreted or otherwise, no longer feels completely out of bounds. It becomes a question not of possibility, but of interpretation. Some point to unusual traits in certain groups, differences in skull shape, bone structure, or immune response, as reflections of ancient genetic blending. High-altitude populations in the Himalayas carry Denisovan genes that allow them to breathe thin air. Northern Europeans carry Neanderthal genes that influence skin tone and immunity. These inherited adaptations illustrate how powerful ancient genetic exchanges can be. It is not difficult to imagine how ancient peoples, observing such differences in their kings or priests, might have interpreted them as signs of divine origin. A ruler with exceptional stature, strength, or intellect could easily become the center of myths about celestial ancestry. Modern genealogy adds another dimension to this fascination. With the rise of DNA testing, people across the world have begun uncovering surprising connections to distant lands and ancient populations. Some discover links to Near Eastern lineages, stirring imaginative associations with biblical figures or early Mesopotamian tribes. Others find rare mitochondrial markers, those passed down through the maternal line, that trace back to small, isolated founding populations with no clear archaeological explanation. These discoveries often ignite curiosity, and the idea of a forgotten royal or divine lineage resurfaces in the minds of many. Beyond biological genetics, there's also the concept of cultural or symbolic inheritance, traditions passed down through families, encoded not in DNA, but in rituals, stories, and heirlooms. Certain families in the Middle East and Mediterranean preserve lineages they believe connect them to ancient priest-kings or prophets. These claims may be historically impossible to verify, yet the persistence of such beliefs across millennia highlights a collective memory that refuses to fade. The notion of carrying ancient blood, whether literal or symbolic, becomes a powerful part of identity. In some regions, spiritual lineages parallel genetic ones. Orders of mystics, sages, and secretive brotherhoods maintain that they preserve teachings originating from the first cities of the world. Their genealogies trace not only biological descent, but also the transmission of esoteric knowledge, mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and ceremonial rites. Some claim that this knowledge descended from beings of immense intelligence, remembered in myth as gods or watchers. Whether seen as metaphor or literal inheritance, these traditions echo the ancient claim that certain groups stood closer to the divine source of civilization. Speculation becomes especially intense when discussing unusual genetic markers found in regions associated with legends of antediluvian kings. Some researchers point to rare haplotypes in parts of Iran, Iraq, and the Caucasus, suggesting these markers may descend from a small, ancient ruling class. While geneticists caution that such markers simply reflect isolated populations, alternative theorists see them as possible remnants of the original priest-king families described in Sumerian tablets. The idea is not that these people carry extraterrestrial DNA in a literal sense, but that their lineage preserves something archaic, perhaps descendants of early human groups modified or elevated by advanced knowledge. Then, there is the striking question of rapid intellectual development. Anatomically modern humans existed for hundreds of thousands of years, yet civilization emerged abruptly in the region of ancient Sumer. In a geological blink, agriculture, writing, mathematics, astronomy, law, architecture, and kingship appeared in one concentrated area. To mainstream thinkers, this reflects social and environmental convergence. But to those seeking deeper meaning, it raises the possibility that a specific group received knowledge or influence from outside their immediate human environment. If a small lineage carried unusual traits or access to unusual instruction, it could explain both the suddenness and the sophistication of early civilizations. Modern people who explore their ancestry often speak of feeling inexplicably drawn to certain historical eras or cultures. While psychology explains such feelings as imagination or personal interest, there's a poetic possibility that memory exists beyond biology. Memory embedded in culture, in collective consciousness, or in the stories families carry through time. Ancient people believed that blood carried not only physical traits, but wisdom, purpose, and destiny. The idea may not hold scientific weight, but it resonates deeply in the human psyche. As genetics progresses, researchers encounter even more mysteries. Fragments of DNA they cannot explain, sequences that appear to serve no purpose, and variations whose effects remain unknown. Some scientists describe vast portions of our genome as dark matter, not fully understood, not fully mapped, and possibly containing undiscovered functions. This scientific blank space fuels speculation about forgotten events in human evolution. Whether or not these mysteries relate to ancient divine bloodlines, they serve as reminders that our understanding of human origins is far from complete. In the end, the question of whether traces of an ancient, exalted lineage still flow through human veins is not one genetics can easily answer. It touches on myth, memory, belief, and the human desire to connect with something greater than ourselves. What is clear is that ancient civilizations believed deeply in the power of blood, and modern science, despite its clinical detachment, still reveals a story filled with complexity, anomaly, and wonder. Perhaps the true inheritance of those early kings is not genetic but cultural. The spark of curiosity, the drive for knowledge, the urge to reach beyond our limits. Or perhaps, hidden somewhere in the vast code that shapes who we are, a faint echo of an ancient past still pulses, waiting to be understood, waiting to be awakened. Across the ancient world, the echoes of the old bloodline appear not as loud proclamations, but as faint, persistent traces. Temples long collapsed still bear symbols that hint at origins older than history itself. Tablets recovered from forgotten sites occasionally mention visitors from the heavens, rulers born of radiant ones, and priests who guarded knowledge said to predate humanity. Most scholars dismiss these as poetic metaphors, yet the consistency of these descriptions across cultures remains striking. Civilizations with no known contact, Sumer, Egypt, the Indus Valley, early China, shared similar myths of celestial teachers and kings whose power came from something not entirely human. As archaeologists uncover deeper layers of antiquity, they find anomalies that resist explanation. Artifacts made with techniques far more advanced than their supposed time period. Astronomical alignments so precise they suggest sophisticated knowledge. Genetic samples revealing sudden jumps in human capability without clear evolutionary steps. Each discovery is cataloged, studied, debated, then quietly placed back into the margins of accepted history. But beneath the surface, a pattern begins to emerge, a pattern of sudden civilizational leaps often attributed to mysterious figures described as the bringers of knowledge. These figures, depicted with strikingly similar features across continents, may represent mythologized members of an early ruling lineage whose influence extended far beyond one region. Some researchers believe these traces indicate not a single dynasty, but a network of families carrying remnants of an ancient inheritance. They appear in sacred texts, in royal genealogies, in symbols carved into the oldest structures on Earth. Though their identities are lost, the impact they left remains unmistakable, shaping human progress in ways we are only beginning to appreciate. Their legacy, faint but enduring, suggests a forgotten chapter of humanity still waiting to be fully uncovered. The question of whether this ancient lineage survives into the modern world has become one of the most compelling and controversial aspects of the mystery. As dynasties fell and empires shattered, the bloodline, if real, would have needed to adapt, blending into the very fabric of society. Some traditions claim that it passed into royal families across Europe and the Near East through carefully arranged marriages meant to preserve a particular heritage. Others suggest it dispersed widely, diluted across populations until it became nearly impossible to trace. In some genealogical records, strange consistencies appear. Families separated by centuries and continents share similar symbols, mottos, or mythic origin stories. Certain lineages claim descent from luminous ancestors, star-born rulers, or godlike kings. Claims often dismissed today, yet deeply rooted in their histories. Whether these stories conceal literal ancestry or symbolic prestige is difficult to determine. More modern interpretations propose that the ancient lineage no longer manifests as political authority, but as influence. If the heirs of early priest-kings survived, they may have shifted from visible thrones to quieter roles: advisors, scholars, financiers, or guardians of preserved knowledge. Some esoteric groups even believe that a small number of individuals still safeguard relics, texts, or teachings inherited from early civilizations, passing them down only to trusted successors. Yet perhaps the most intriguing possibility is that the lineage now lies scattered across millions of people, its once unique traits diffused into humanity itself. The ancient inheritance may persist not as a single dynasty, but as subtle tendencies: intuition, creativity, leadership, curiosity, passed through generations unconsciously, whether concentrated or dispersed, hidden or forgotten. The idea of the surviving lineage endures because it suggests that the ancient world is still with us, quietly shaping the present in ways we rarely notice.